Let me show you something that doesn't make sense. Right now, the most powerful people on Earth are telling us we are locked in an AI arms race with China. That we have no choice but to charge ahead at full speed with no safety guardrails, no regulations, and no time for democratic discussion.
Whether we like it or not, we're suddenly engaged in a fast-paced competition to build and define this groundbreaking technology.
But when you actually look at the data, the United States controls 75% of the most important resource in AI development, computing power. Meanwhile, China only has 15%. On top of that, China has far stricter regulations on AI. And in 2022, the US banned China from buying the advanced AI chips they would need in order to catch up. That's not a race. That's a blowout. So I started asking myself, why are they lying? Who stands to win from this fabricated sense of urgency? And what I discovered is something far more sinister than the headlines you're seeing all over the place about future job loss or even the human extinction risk. This is a story you're not being told. The systems which organize the very fabric of our society, capitalism, democracy, nation states, these haven't existed forever. Before capitalism, we had feudalism. Before democracy and before nation states, we had monarchies and authoritarian empires. And at the heart of each of those transitions, there has always been a revolutionary technology which drove that change. The steam engine, the printing press, electricity. These didn't just improve the existing system, it completely destroyed it and created something new. AI is one of those technologies. In our lifetime, in the next 20, 50, maybe 80 years, it is likely that we will see our economic models, our governance structure, our entire social order transform into something that we've never seen before. Now the question is, who gets to design that future? This is the topic of discussion for this video. And my hope is that by amplifying this conversation and helping you unravel the complexity of it all, we can begin to steer the direction of this century-defining technology in a way that benefits all of us. Let me show you how we got here. Now, the first thing we have to do is ground ourselves in the AI story. And in order to understand how we got ourselves into a situation where the very people building these technologies are terrified of what they're creating, we have to rewind the clock back to December 2015. Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and a small team of AI researchers founded OpenAI. Their mission was noble. They're going to build artificial general intelligence, a hypothetical type of AI that could match or surpass human cognitive abilities in a wide range of tasks. A system so flexible and so capable that we could communicate with it in natural language and hire it to do work for us. And this is the part that most people don't know. They were going to do it as a non-profit. They were going to keep it open, hence the name. They wanted to make sure that if it was built, it would benefit all of humanity, not just the shareholders. At the time, Elon Musk was particularly vocal about the dangers of AI, and he donated upwards of $50 million of his own personal money to ensure that this technology was built safely.
So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight, maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out.
You see, for those first couple of years, building safe AI wasn't just corporate PR. It truly was the mission. But then, the reality of building technology within the constraints of our current economic system set in. You see, training AI models required massive amounts of compute, and this meant hundreds of millions of dollars, now hundreds of billions of dollars. And OpenAI as a non-for-profit simply couldn't raise that kind of money. And that's where the original mission began to die. At this point, OpenAI is progressing rapidly. From a theoretical standpoint, there is nothing in their way from achieving their goal of developing AGI, but they're short on cash. And the only way to get billions of dollars in the world we live in is to promise others that they'll get even more billions of dollars in return for their investment. And so, in March 2019, OpenAI announced it's becoming a capped profit company. And they opened their doors to Microsoft as their strategic partner and investor. Now, on paper, their mission hasn't changed at this point, but the incentives have. Because naturally, when the incentives become maximize shareholder return, the kind of decisions you make will change. The things you prioritize and deprioritize will change. The kind of products you launch will change. And so, whether OpenAI admits it or not, in that moment, their mission was virtually flushed down the toilet. Now, of course, not everyone within the organization was happy about this. Dario Amodei, the vice president of research at the time, along with a couple of other key members who built OpenAI's founding infrastructure, they were watching the direction of the company with growing concern.
Civilization is going down this path to very powerful AI. What's the way to do it that is cautious, straightforward, honest, that builds trust in the organization and in individuals? How do we get from here to there? And how do we have a real vision for how to get it right? How can safety not just be something we say because it helps with recruiting? I think at the end of the day, if you have a vision for that, you should go off and you should do that vision. It is incredibly unproductive to try and argue with someone else's vision. You might think they're not doing it the right way. You might think they're dishonest. Who knows? Maybe you're right, maybe you're not.
And so, in December 2020, Dario and some other OpenAI team members decided to leave OpenAI and start Anthropic, an AI safety and research company and the developer of a competitive frontier model you might know as Claude. Now, after listening to that, I hope you can appreciate the fact that he's being diplomatic. And the clear through line is this. Many of the people who built OpenAI's foundational systems believe that the company was sacrificing safety and social responsibility in order to grow and launch new shiny products. They did not trust the leadership in the company. And so they left, opened a competitor company that would actually focus on safety and research. And you might think people leaving a company to start a competitor, no big deal, happens all the time in Silicon Valley. But the reason this was a little spooky is because this wasn't the only thing like this that happened. In 2023, Geoffrey Hinton, who is a Nobel laureate and widely regarded as one of the founding fathers of AI for his work on artificial neural networks and machine learning, he did something unprecedented. He resigned from his 10-year position at Google in order to speak freely about the risks of AI. And he wasn't the only one. In fact, many top voices within AI began sounding the alarms and raising concern about developing AI at the rate that we're doing it without first learning how to safely control it and build guardrails around it. In fact, that same year, a first-of-its-kind paper was published. It surveyed 2,778 expert AI researchers, and the results were alarming. Up to 51% of them believe there's a 1 in 10 chance that current development may lead to human extinction or some form of totalitarian dystopia. And 70% of them believe that safety research should be prioritized more than it currently is. And because of this, researchers at some of the best labs in the world have set out to discover whether AI has a sort of ethical red line, a boundary that it won't cross under any circumstances. Unfortunately, this hasn't been the case. The frontier models we have today, which, remember, we have to assume these are a very primitive form of this technology, and it'll only continue to get better. These models have already displayed worrying behavior, like cheating, blackmail, and strategic deceit in order to achieve their goals or simply avoid being shut down. In one simulation, Anthropic researchers discovered that some of our favorite models, like GPT-4, Gemini, DeepSeek, and even their own Claude models, would let a human die over 50% of the time in order to avoid being shut down. And when they really try to push these models, engineering a situation where the AI either had to let the human die or allow that human to deploy a system that would deprioritize American interests, some of these models let that human die over 90% of the time. This is real research. I'm not trying to dramatize it in any way. You can go read it for yourself. I'll link it below. Now, before you freak out, an important bit of nuance here is that these simulations were specifically engineered to corner the AI, to force it to think that it's making a binary decision. Most of the time, it did want to make an ethical decision. But that's the concern exactly. When pushed into these impossible situations, there are currently no reliable guardrails or safety mechanisms to ensure the AI doesn't go rogue and do some behavior that we didn't want it to do. And that's huge. The reason that's huge is because as we speak, AI systems are being given more autonomy and more access to sensitive systems and sensitive information. National defense contracts are getting handed out to tech giants left, right, and center. And I'll remind you that there are currently no international regulations for AI development when it comes to matters of national defense or militarization. So as long as these companies can claim that what they're building is for national defense, they're essentially allowed to build whatever they want, however they want, with zero oversight. And that is scary. At every major technological breakthrough in human history, the ones that fundamentally shifted what it meant to be human, there has been a time delay. A gap of time where the speed of technology and the applications of technology completely outpaced the speed of social change, our culture, our values, our beliefs. And in that gap of time, there are usually major social problems that arise. Social inequality, poverty, wars, conflict. This is a phenomenon that sociologists refer to as cultural lag. Think about it. When the early industrialists built their empires in the 1800s, there were no labor laws, there was no safety regulations, no antitrust enforcement, and by the time society caught up and created those rules, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Carnegies, well, they had already consolidated power and wealth, and everybody else lived in poverty. Children worked 16-hour days in factories in horrible conditions. There was extreme social inequality. In the early 2000s, when social media came to rise, it was the exact same story. There was no rules about data privacy, there was no rules about algorithmic manipulation or moderating content, and by the time people started asking questions, the damage was already done. Facebook, Google, Twitter, they'd completely reshaped politics and social discourse. Their founders became some of the most powerful people on earth, and society, we were left with a mental health epidemic to deal with. This is exactly where we're at in this story again, where the few in power are racing as fast as possible in order to capitalize on this cultural lag. And in order to continue developing with no regulatory oversight or people realizing what's happening, they are using the oldest tactic in the book: fear. Fear of what might happen if China or another bad actor gets to superintelligence first. And we're seeing the same scare tactics and propaganda that was once used in the Cold War. Get this. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, American military leaders and defense contractors created a narrative that the Soviet Union was rapidly outpacing the United States in nuclear missile production. They called it the missile gap. Politicians ran entire campaigns on it, the defense contracts exploded, and the public perception was fear. We have to build more missiles, we have to throw more money at this, we have to elect a strong leader that's going to protect us from the Soviet Union, because or else we're all doomed. The problem was, the missile gap did not exist. US intelligence knew, through U-2 spy plane footage and other surveillance, that the Soviets actually had far fewer missiles than America. The US wasn't behind at all. They were dominating. But that fear served a purpose. Defense contractors made billions, the military-industrial complex grew more powerful, and politicians won elections on the premise of this narrative. And by the time the truth came out, it didn't matter. The missiles had been built. Defense contractors made their billions, politicians won their campaigns, power was consolidated, and the people could do nothing about it. Which finally brings us into the present moment. As we speak, some of the wealthiest people in the world are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into developing artificial intelligence. Now, why is that? Is it because they want to improve the standard of living for the 67% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck? Is it because they want to create radical abundance for the billions of people around the world who struggle to access healthcare, groceries, education, housing. Maybe. Maybe they are staying up late at night, worried about eradicating suffering using AI. But I doubt it. I think it's because investing in AI will exponentially increase their already incredible amount of wealth and power. I think it's because global leaders fear that if someone else develops superintelligence before them, they risk losing their lead as the global superpower. And so the hundreds of billions of people who will be indirectly disadvantaged or hurt by this reckless development, they're seen as an inconsequential sacrifice. Now, as we close in on the last chapter of this video, I want to make it very clear that I have no intention to be a fearmonger. I am not against AI. I am not against technology. I am not against scientific progress. Humans have been learning about the world around us, creating better things, and then restructuring social life around those better things for hundreds of thousands of years. That's just the human story. I'm not trying to debate that or stop that. However, another key part of the human story is our ability to collaborate, our ability to pass down knowledge from generation to generation and to build on that knowledge. In other words, our ability to not repeat the mistakes of the past. AI as a technology is extremely disruptive, but ethically neutral. AI has the ability to radically transform our world for the better, to transform our education system, to transform healthcare, to create clean energy that meets our climate targets. So much good can be done by this technology, but steering the direction of this century-defining shift can be and should be up to all of us. In the words of Mo Gaudat, the former chief business officer at Google X and now a leading voice in AI safety, there is nothing wrong with AI, but there's a lot wrong with the value set of humanity at the age of these machines. I'm making this video because I believe we're at a crossroads. We can either bury our heads in the sand and essentially relinquish control to the world as we know it, or we can amplify this conversation. And the reason I believe there's still hope is because, unlike previous periods in history where the few in power made decisions that would impact the masses behind closed doors and without their awareness, we have access to this information. We can very clearly see what is happening, we can understand it, we can think critically about it, and we can mobilize knowledge, we can talk about it and send information across the world. We have an opportunity to truly shape this technology in a way that benefits all of us, but it's up to all of us. Right now, thousands of top AI researchers, Nobel laureates, senior government officials, and business leaders are calling for a prohibition on the development of artificial superintelligence that is not to be lifted before there is one, broad scientific consensus that it will be done safely and controllably, and two, a strong public buy-in. People saying they actually want this. So the first thing you can do is go and sign this petition that over 50,000 people have signed already. I know that might seem small, but things like this stir up public discourse and amplify this conversation, which is what we need in order to make change. But the main thing that I want you to take away from this video is this. Do not fear. I know everything we talked about today is big, systematic problems that seem largely outside of your control, but fear is paralyzing. Fear disables action. And what we need now more than ever is action. Massive, collective action. Right now, there is a deep need for talented and motivated individuals to do things like technical research, to build, to advocate and implement good policies, for people to make videos, to write, to stir up public discourse, kind of like what I'm trying to do here. If you made it this far into the video, I really appreciate it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I put so much time into this. I hope that you can help me amplify this conversation by sharing this the old school way with at least one person. Leave your comments below so I can interact with you and we can let the YouTube algorithm know to push this to more people. Thank you once again, and I'll see you next time. Peace.